Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade didn't tremble, even though the hand holding it belonged to a man who had been dead to the world for 5 years. It pressed against the jugular of the intruder, a sliver of cold steel separating life from death, hidden within the shadows of a dilapidated cottage. Outside, the thunder of hooves tore through the silent, rain-slicked night, but inside, the silence was heavier, suffocating. The intruder didn't fight, he didn't even breathe. He simply raised a gloved hand, catching the moonlight that bled through the cracked shutters, and pulled back his hood. "Is this how you greet the father of your children, Lysander?" The voice was low, a velvet rasp that scraped against Lysander's soul, instantly shattering his resolve. The knife clattered to the floor. 5 years ago, Lysander had been the envy of the imperial court, the favored scholar, the beauty who had captured the heart of Crown Prince Calin. But favor in the viper's nest that was the capital was a death sentence. When the accusations of treason and poisoning were fabricated against him, Lysander hadn't waited for the trial. He knew Calin, knew the man's ruthless adherence to the law above all else. Or so he had believed. He had fled into the night, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back and a secret that had just begun to swell within him. Now, Lysander was merely Ash, the mute apothecary of the border village of Rivenwood. He wore rough linen instead of silk, and his hands were stained with herbs rather than ink. He had traded his voice for safety, pretending to be mute to avoid slipping into the cultured accent of the nobility. He lived for 2 things, Elian and Silas, his twin sons. They were 4 years old, wild things with hair like spun midnight and eyes that held the dangerous molten gold of the imperial bloodline. Lysander kept their hair long, covering their necks, and made them wear hoods when they played near the village square. But fate, cruel and inevitable, had arrived in the form of the imperial hunting party. The news had spread through Rivenwood at dawn. The crown prince was inspecting the northern borders. Lysander had locked the cottage door, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He ordered the twins to stay in the cellar, inventing a game of silent mice. "Stay hidden," he had signed to them, his hands shaking. "No matter what you hear." Silas, the quiet one, had nodded, clutching his wooden toy soldier. But Elian had his father's fire. Elian was curious. While Lysander was distracted bartering for supplies, he would need to flee the village that very night. Elian had slipped out. The boy wanted to see the horses. He wanted to see the golden man the village children whispered about. The incident happened in the blink of an eye. The royal procession was moving through the muddy main street. Prince Calin sat atop a massive warhorse, his posture rigid, his face a mask of sculpted ice. He looked older, Lysander noted from his hiding spot behind a stack of crates. There were lines of cruelty etched around Calin's mouth that hadn't been there before. He looked like a man who had burned the world and found no satisfaction in the ashes. A stray dog, startled by the drums, darted into the street. Elian, foolish and brave, chased after it. "No!" Lysander's scream died in his throat, choked by his mute persona. The horse reared. The crowd gasped. Calin reined the beast in with a terrifying display of strength, the warhorse's hooves slashing the air inches from the small child's head. Silence descended on the street. Calin dismounted in one fluid motion. The royal guards tensed, hands on sword hilts, ready to punish the peasant child for endangering the air. Calin ignored them. He strode toward the boy who had fallen back into the mud, the hood of his tunic thrown back by the fall. Elian didn't cry. He looked up, his jaw set in a defiant pout that mirrored the man towering over him. "You should control your mount," Elian chirped, his high voice ringing clear. The crowd drew a collective breath of horror. A peasant speaking to the prince? Calin froze. He stared down at the boy. Slowly, he dropped to one knee, heedless of the mud staining his pristine white breeches. He reached out, a leather-gloved finger hooking under Elian's chin to tilt his face up. "Brave," Calin murmured, his voice devoid of its usual terrifying chill. And foolish. It was then that Kaelin saw it. The collar of Elian's tunic had been torn in the fall. There, stark against the pale skin of the boy's collarbone, was a birthmark. It wasn't a random blemish. It was a jagged, crimson mark shaped distinctly like a rising dragon, the hereditary mark of the Valdrin bloodline. A mark that appeared only on the firstborn sons of the direct line. Even Kaelin had one, hidden beneath his armor. Kaelin's eyes widened, the gold in his irises flaring. He brushed the fabric aside, exposing the mark fully. His hand trembled. "Who is your mother?" Kaelin whispered, his voice cracking. "Where is your father?" Elian, sensing the shift in atmosphere, pointed toward the alleyway where Lysander was hiding. Lysander turned to run. It was a reflex, a primal need to survive. But he barely made it 3 steps before the heavy, iron grip of a royal guard slammed him against the brick wall. He was dragged not to a dungeon, but to the commandeered mayor's manor. The luxury of the room felt alien after years of squalor. Lysander stood in the center of the room, his hands bound before him. He kept his head bowed, his hair hanging like a curtain over his face. The door opened. Kaelin entered, shutting it firmly behind him. He was alone. No guards. No witnesses. Kaelin walked around Lysander slowly, like a predator circling wounded prey. The air crackled with a tension so thick it tasted of ozone. "They say you are mute," Kaelin said softly, stopping in front of him. "They say you are a widower named Ash. They say you have a son." Lysander said nothing. "Look at me." Lysander didn't move. Kaelin's hand shot out, gripping Lysander's jaw, forcing his head up. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through both of them. For a moment, time suspended. Kaelin stared into Lysander's eyes. Eyes he had dreamed of, eyes he had mourned. "Lysander," Kaelin breathed, the name sounding like a prayer and a curse. "Kaelin," Lysander whispered, breaking his 5-year silence. Kaelin released him as if burned, stepping back. His expression shifted from shock to a terrifying, cold fury. "You're alive. You're alive, and you stole my son." "I saved him," Lysander snapped, the fear transmuting into defensive anger. "I saved him from you, from your court, from the poison that killed your mother, from me." Kaelin's laugh was a dark, broken thing. "Do you think I would have harmed you? Do you think I would have let them touch a hair on your head? You signed the warrant," Lysander cried, tears finally spilling over. "I saw the seal, Kaelin. The execution order for treason, for poisoning the Grand Duke. It had your signature." Kaelin froze. The fury drained from his face, replaced by a haunting realization. He walked to a desk, pouring a glass of wine with a shaking hand, but he didn't drink it. He stared at the red liquid. "I signed no such order," Kaelin said, his voice hollow. "When you vanished, when they told me you had fled with the northern spies, I tore the capital apart. I executed 3 ministers who dared to suggest you were guilty. I burned the Grand Duke's estate to the ground when I found out he had forged evidence against you." Lysander felt the world tilt. "Forged? My uncle wanted the throne." Kaelin turned, his eyes burning with intensity. "He knew you were my weakness. He knew if he threatened you, I would be distracted. He didn't expect you to run. He forged my signature to scare you off, to make you disappear so I would break." Kaelin stepped closer, invading Lysander's space again. He reached out, his fingers tracing the scar on Lysander's cheek, a souvenir from his escape years ago. "I thought you left because you never loved me," Kaelin admitted, his voice dropping to a vulnerable whisper that no one in the Empire had ever heard. "I thought you used me and fled. I left to protect the child." Lysander sobbed, his knees giving way. Kaelin caught him, pulling him against his chest. The familiar scent of sandalwood and steel enveloped Lysander, breaking the dam of 5 years of loneliness. "I thought, if I stayed, they would kill the baby inside me." "The baby?" Kaelin's hand moved to Lysander's waist, pulling him flush against him. The boy with the dragon mark. He is mine. Yes. He is beautiful. Kaelin buried his face in Lysander's neck, inhaling deeply. He has your temper. Lysander hesitated. The weight of the second secret pressed on him. If Kaelin knew about Elien, he would find out about the other eventually. Kaelin, Lysander pulled back slightly, looking into the prince's eyes. He isn't the only one. Kaelin frowned. What? There were 2. Kaelin's eyes went wide. Twins. Silas. He is hiding in the cellar. He is like you. Quiet. Watchful. A complex emotion washed over Kaelin's face. A mixture of awe, grief for the lost years, and a fierce, possessive joy. 2 sons. You hid 2 princes in a mud hut. I hid my children, Lysander corrected fiercely. Our children, Kaelin corrected back, his tone brooking no argument. He gripped Lysander's chin again, but this time the touch was tender, reverent. You have robbed me of 5 years, Lysander. You have robbed me of their first steps, their first words. I did what I had to. I know. Kaelin cut him off, leaning his forehead against Lysander's. And I hate that you were right. I hate that my protection was not enough then. But hear me now. Kaelin's hand moved to the nape of Lysander's neck, his fingers tangling in the long, unkempt hair. I am not the prince I was 5 years ago. I am the regent now, the emperor in all but name, and I will burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let anyone take you or our sons from me again. He kissed Lysander then. A searing, desperate collision of lips that tasted of salt and wine and years of starvation. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a reclaiming. It was Kaelin marking his territory, pouring all his rage and love into the contact. Lysander melted into it, his hands clutching the lapels of Kaelin's coat, anchoring himself against the storm. When they broke apart, breathless and flushed, Kaelin kept his arm wrapped tight around Lysander's waist. We go back, Kaelin stated. Tomorrow. The court will eat us alive, Lysander warned. A commoner returning with the heirs? They will call them bastards. Kaelin's smile was terrifying. It was the smile of a wolf who had finally cornered the hunters. Let them try, Kaelin whispered against Lysander's ear. I have spent 5 years sharpening my blade for the day I found the truth. Tomorrow they will not see a commoner. They will see the consort. And if anyone dares to question the legitimacy of my sons. Kaelin's eyes darkened. They will learn why the dragon is the sigil of our house. The next morning, the village of Rivenwood watched in awe. They expected to see the mute apothecary in chains. Instead, they saw him mounted on a white mare beside the prince, wearing a cloak of royal velvet. And in the carriage behind them, 2 small boys with eyes of molten gold peered out, waving at their friends. As the procession moved out, Kaelin reached across the gap between their horses and took Lysander's hand, interlacing their fingers in plain sight of the soldiers, the villagers, and the spies watching from the trees. The exile was over. The reign of the dragon family had just begun. And that is how the prince reclaimed his stolen heart and the heirs to his empire. If you enjoyed seeing Kaelin turn from a cold tyrant into a possessive protector, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Kaelin? Or would you have kept running to protect the twins? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,